What's poppin', people? It's Dante. Today we're going to be discussing how to thrive in the mundane. Street photography and finding beauty in the everyday is one of the things that I'm most passionate about these days, where I'm out there in the world looking at life like it's an endless expanse for me to explore, to walk upon, to photograph. And I find that there's something so special about finding beauty in the mundane as a street photographer that allows us to thrive as humans generally. Where the philosophy of the mundane is essentially where photography, it just gives endless meaning to life. No matter where you are, no matter what you see, no matter what you're doing, you can always find something to do, to create, to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. And so essentially when I'm out there and I'm walking and I'm observing life, I'm not thinking about what life is, but what life could be. And so the question I ask to myself each day is, what will reality manifest to be in a photograph today? Where I treat the life in front of me and the world as my canvas, where every little detail, every fleeting moment becomes beautiful. It's the art of observation. When you see a moment, you're not just looking at life itself, but what you're doing when you're taking a picture is you're transforming that moment into something new, into something fresh, into something novel through the act of making a photograph. And so when you start to look at life in all of its complexities, whether you're looking at the details on the ground or you're looking at the people and the way they gesture, the buildings above you, the way the light falls, all of these very small things become infinite possibilities for us to create as artists. And I find that the most mundane situations, the most repetitive scenes that you see every single day, every single week, can become a new opportunity for you to create. And here we have a photograph I made of a flag raising, of the Kosovo flag raising, and it was just a regular weekly thing. Every other week or every month there's a flag raising in Philadelphia, and you see the same thing each time. You see the people raise the podium, go to the podium, speak, raise the flag, and it's a very mundane situation, but I always make the effort to photograph in these scenes, where I find beauty in the everyday. Just imagine a simple patch of light. A patch of light on a street corner. To most people, this is just like the background, right? But for me as a photographer with the camera, it becomes a very sacred space for me to create upon. It's similar to a skateboarder seeing a ledge as a canvas for them to play upon, to do a new trick. For me as a photographer, I see all of the different complexities around me as a way for me to skate upon it, in a way, right? Like if you think of a street skateboarder and the way that they land tricks on different found objects, whether they're railings, stair sets, ledges. As photographers, you need to see potential everywhere, sort of like a skateboarder analyzing the streets as their skate park. And so I treat the world as a playground, right? And so when you treat the world like a playground, it's not so serious, right? Think of a child. When a child goes out to play, they're simply going out there voluntarily. They want to go out there and play. And I think that as we get older and we have to, focus a little bit too much on our goals and, we're striving for success and whatever that means, we sort of involuntarily force ourselves to play the game. And I think that becomes a bit challenging. And that's where the mundane starts to become very boring and repetitive. But when you're going out there voluntarily and you're playing and you're not taking life so seriously, this to me is like the mindset shift where you start to thrive in these mundane walks. Because for me, treating the world as a playground, treating the world as a canvas just provides endless meaning in my life. And I don't know how to describe this in words because, there's such a simple act of observation that provides you with so much joy. When I'm working in the gardens at work, I tend plants in a greenhouse, and when I'm tending the plants and I'm very focused on these small details and I'm looking at the patterns in nature and I'm looking at these repetitive things each and every day, and sometimes I'll see like the reflection of the light on a spider web that's like growing in between different plants, or a leaf falls. These very small moments become so beautiful to photograph and to observe and to witness. And I think that everything is photographable. This to me is the beauty of street photography, where everything becomes fair game. Whether you're photographing a stranger, you're photographing cracks in the pavement, reflections or shadows, there's something so special about treating the world as our canvas. And so when you recognize beauty in the mundane, photograph it. If you have that moment where you're looking at something and it has you ask a question, or it has you somewhat intrigued, or you see even just the smallest glimmer of beauty, this is where we raise our camera and we click the shutter and we're simply asking, what is life showing me right now? We're asking questions when we're clicking the shutter. And I think that this act of making a photograph is beautiful because we're abstracting the world around us. We're turning our reality into poetry. And the simplest things in life, whether you're walking upon the sidewalk and see the footprint that's left behind after there's new paintings or new painting done or new asphalt laid, or you see here on this photograph I made on the right-hand side of a children's chalk drawings upon the ground, right? Like I find, when you're out there on the streets and you're looking for these next best photos that you want to make, and you're looking for those decisive moments, and you're typically focused on photographing people as a street photographer, it can become burdensome. You can start to involuntarily play the game. But when you go out there and you embrace the spirit of play and you start to notice beauty in the mundane, you start to make photographs that resonate with this way of looking at the world. And I look at the details. I look at the things that are left behind and all of these little fleeting moments that I find beauty in. And so there's something to be said about thriving through repetition, through actually going out there and embracing boredom, where essentially I can walk the same mundane lane every single day and still find infinite ways to say something new, infinite ways for me to create. And to me, that's the power of being a photographer, where photography, it becomes a superpower, where you really do thrive in the mundane. You thrive in those repetitive walks. I love walking the same streets each day. I love observing life. I love simply going out there and seeing what's happening around the corner. To me, that's the beauty of repetition. It's thriving in it. It's not being, like boredom. Boredom is interesting because I think that we should thrive in boredom. We should thrive in our repetition because this is what's going to transform our creativity. It's thriving in boredom, essentially. Where you're making pictures in the same streets, you're looking at these very mundane, banal scenes, and you might feel like you're just looking at people passing by, or everyone's just on their phones, no one's really doing anything anymore in the city streets, which, you could argue. I mean, you see people walking around and no one's really like engaging with each other. There's not much emotion on the face. Actually, just recently I was talking with a photographer, and we were like, he showed me a photo he made of a couple kissing, and like that's like a very common thing you see in street photography. But in my head, I'm like, I don't remember the last time I've seen a couple kiss on the streets. It's a very rare thing, actually. And so you have to thrive in boredom, right? Thriving in boredom is what's going to lead you to creativity. Where one of my favorite things to do is I love going for these very long walks on the Schuylkill River Trail here in my hometown, Philadelphia. And I don't know why, but I feel like when I'm walking the same route each day, I feel like it just unlocks new ways for me to thrive as a creative, where I have this constraint of walking this one path, and I can't go left, I can't go right, but through removing those illusions of choice of whether or not I can go right or whether or not I can go left, and simply staying to that straight and narrow path and moving forward, I find that I become more creative because of these constraints. It's very similar to using the same lens, using the same camera for years on end. And when you become, in tune with your gear and you limit yourself to using one camera, you limit yourself to using one lens, this is going to make you more creative instead of having a million different choices. And so this to me is the art of essentially limiting yourself. And I think through those limitations that it can seemingly be boring, right? Like the fact that you have to do the same thing each day, use the same gear each day, it can be boring, I guess. But through that boredom, it'll lead you to becoming more creative. And in these periods of the day where you're bored, nowadays you turn to your phone, right? You go on social media, you scroll, you watch things, you reach out to your friends. You have to always be stimulated and seek dopamine. But for me as an artist, when I'm out there in the world and I'm observing things and I have a camera and I take pictures of these moments, this to me is how I get my dopamine. I get my dopamine in the most simplest ways, by looking at the way the light falls or watching somebody cross the street. I mean, this is such a beautiful thing that boredom leads us to creativity as street photographers. And so the goal when I'm out there and I'm making pictures and I'm in this state of boredom, you could say, where I'm walking the same mundane lane, is to essentially stop thinking and just be in a state that is so present and so observational, where I'm looking at life so intensely in the moment that I exist outside the passage of time, where I'm just in the moment and I'm photographing from that pure state of observation. And the most mundane situations, the most mundane things become extraordinary when you look at it with a camera. And so the flow state is very simple. When I'm out there on the streets, I'm looking at everything. I'm scanning the light. I'm looking at people. I'm watching the buildings and looking at the way the light falls upon them, and I'm observing all these very simple things. And when I'm in this sort of flow state, I'm very much in tune with the rhythm and the beat of the street. And when I'm making photographs, I stop thinking, and I respond intuitively. I respond with my instincts. And I think that act of responding to your gut and simply making more pictures and being very observational and walking at a slow pace and being in tune with everything around you, it really does make you feel good. It makes you feel joyous. And I think this is the goal, is when you're embracing the mundane and you thrive in boredom and you find beauty in all these very small things, it just makes you a happier human, and it makes you more grateful for life. And that's, to me, the art of thriving in the mundane as an artist. It's finding ways to champion life and the everyday moments that we discover on our walks. One of my favorite things is finding the gutter as paradise. Where I'll walk by old alleyways that barely anyone walks down, and I'll find these crumpled newspapers, fast food wrappers, broken glass, old receipts, or here we have a photo I made of a shopping list next to a photo I made of a children's chalk drawing on the ground. When I'm photographing these like discarded objects, or I'm photographing these things that are left behind, I feel as though I'm photographing the human condition, right? I'm photographing these leftovers, the decay, the imperfection. All of this is real and describes life of the street. And so when you find beauty in the downtrodden, when you find beauty in these mundane moments of life, it does change your perspective and how you view life. And I find that ultimately, as human beings, we are bound by gravity. We cut, we bleed, we feel sorrow, pain, and greed. We lust for the flesh of others. We are imperfect in our design. And I try with my photography to remind ourselves that we will and must die. And so I find sacred in the trash. I don't want to just document beauty. I want to find beauty in the ugliness, the grime, the suffering, the cracks, where life isn't perfect, right? Life is fleeting. And I think that there is something sacred there. There is something beautiful about finding something from nothing, essentially. And I find that by observing these mundane moments and photographing them, I thrive as an artist. And I thrive by not only looking at the beauty of the light and looking at the joyous moments, but also finding beauty in the suffering, beauty in the pain, and beauty in all of the complexities of life. And so we should redefine success. When you're out there and you're making pictures, you might look at something and say, oh, I don't want to take a picture of that. It's just a shadow. It's cliche. You're having this preconception in your head about what people deem to be good or bad, whether or not you want to have success from a gallery, a book deal, etc. But realistically, when you're photographing for yourself. This is the most pure way to approach photography, is simply photographing to scratch your own curiosity. Because for me, true success in photography is curiosity. It is that passion and that joy that it fuels you with through the process of making new pictures. So stay curious, stay playful, shoot freely, don't limit yourself. This to me is the art of thriving in the mundane. It's going limitless. It's going beyond what you deem to be good or bad. It's going beyond what people say is street photography or is not street photography. Thriving in the mundane as a street photographer is all about forgetting about validation, forgetting about the gallery walls, and simply embracing curiosity as our newfound metric for what is success. If you're waking up each day excited, if you're waking up each day enthusiastic, ready to make new pictures with curiosity at the forefront, you are successful. Look at the word enthusiasm. The word enthusiasm, theos meaning God, it means essentially to be possessed by a God, to be possessed by God. If you're enthusiastic, if you have pep in your step and curiosity, if you're possessed by God, this to me is success. And so chase enthusiasm, chase curiosity, and remember that your next photograph is your best. Don't get caught up with making better photos. Get caught up with increasing your curiosity and making new photos. And when I look at this particular photograph I made of this couple walking upon the promenade in Rome, I remind myself how open the world is, how much there is to do, to see, to explore, and to photograph in our life of ours. And that to me is such an abundant feeling, where this very mundane photo that I made of this beautiful landscape with a couple holding hands walking down the street can become something extraordinary, and remind myself of how endless this life of ours is. And so don't shy away from making photographs of these seemingly boring, banal moments, because if something resonates with you, if something drives you to click the shutter, this to me is the art of observation. It's the art of finding beauty in the mundane. It's really becoming more in tune with your authentic expression as an artist, and not necessarily getting caught up with what other people deem to be good or bad, but photographing through that inner childlike curiosity. And for me, when I look out at the world in front of me and I see, the same mundane scenes, I think about how many infinite possibilities there are upon a street corner, how many infinite possibilities there are in our lifetime to make new photographs. And I don't know, it's just such an abundant feeling that I get. And so thriving in the mundane means being able to walk the same lane every single day, but still finding something to photograph. It's seeing sacred in the trash and the divine in repetition. It's finding beauty in the mundane. It's about going slow, right? And just being hyper aware of your surroundings, finding yourself in tune with the rhythm of the street, finding yourself walking upon the concrete and appreciating the small things, finding beauty in the walk, finding beauty in the mundane, the feeling of the air on your skin. These are some of the ideas that I'm really passionate about these days, is the art of observation and thriving in the mundane. And I find that these simple ideas can hopefully inspire you to also break through with your photography and to not limit yourself and to thrive in the mundane stroll. We're going into winter. Winter is a very hard time for people to get out and practice street photography. Despite the bad weather, despite the lack of interesting things happening on the street, I want you to go out there and push yourself to thrive in the mundane, to find beauty in these overlooked things that you maybe haven't photographed before, and try to push yourself to make photographs in these seemingly mundane situations where there is bad weather, there is bad light, there isn't anything interesting happening, and champion that and thrive in that. And so if you enjoyed today's video, you can go to my website at dantesisifo.com to find more. I've got 3 free ebooks on my books tab. We have the Ultimate Guide to the Ricoh GR. We have my contact sheets and the Mastering Layering in Street Photography Guide, where you can learn about the art of layering. And that's pretty much it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.